Um, so I invited Dee Godkin to come talk to us because she works with the Omaha Nation and kind of just, kind of explore a little bit what she's doing. But there was something that caught my attention a while ago when we were talking, and I don't even know. I don't remember the conversation. So it may be completely out of left field and had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but just this idea of really centering the stories of other cultures and nations, from like letting them tell the story, letting them tell their own narrative. And if you think about it, I think so much of our history, we actually haven't really done that. We have had archaeologists, or we've had sociologists, or all these people who go and study different cultures and then come back and tell us about it. And we actually don't. I don't know. I'd be interested to look at textbooks now, how much of it actually comes from the people's own voices, their own words, their own telling of their story. And I think something that is very, I think, wonderful about what we've done as LDS people is we actually have, we have told our story, good or bad, right? I mean, sometimes it's not completely accurate, but we've been very insistent. We are very we are telling our story. We're taking record. We're keeping notes. We're telling our story. So I think we absolutely understand the need to do that. I don't know how great we've been at letting other people tell their stories, but I think we recognize the importance of telling our own story. So it just struck me, this idea. So I kind of titled this, centering and honoring other cultures' narratives and allowing them to tell that story. So Dee, with that kind of introduction, if you want to just kind of explain a little bit your work with the Omaha Nation, how that began, your interest in it, just kind of the beginning and what you do now.
Well, it kind of weirdly happened. I'm the archivist for the Bank of Florence and the Florence Historical Foundation. And I found these pictures under the floorboards of the bank, which everybody but you, Rachel, has been there.
I know.
So they can in their mind's eye imagine what it was like finding them under the floor. And they were all these Native American pictures that I had no clue what tribe, who they were. I had nothing. So I happened to go up to the Trail Center, and at the time Elder Kane was serving his mission there, and I was showing him the pictures because he's a photographer. And he goes, you know what? I know somebody who might at least be able to tell us who the tribe is. And they introduced me to Ed Webster. And Ed is a full-blooded Omaha Indian. And not only did he know who they were, he named them all by name, told me stories about the ones that he had stories about. And Elder Kane gave me his phone number, and I just called him out of the blue. And as he puts it, I don't know, some strange lady called me and wanted to know if I could maybe identify some pictures. And that started me down the path with them because I'm a curious George. And so I kind of just kept asking him questions. And he tried to fluff me off. And then he realized that I was truly curious. I wanted to know. And that began almost 4-year relationship with the Omaha Nation. And I've now been adopted into the tribe, which is really cool. They are just an amazing people. And that's kind of how it got started.
Great. It's so interesting. So along with that, that kind of beginning, how did that evolve? Well, you said now if you're adopted into the tribe, obviously you've been accepted as a part of them. And how did that kind of evolve into where you're at now, just from those beginnings and kind of your understanding of who they are and they're coming to trust you? Like, what was the process there that you went through?
Oh, I was tested. The Omaha Nation's experience with the white man, quote unquote, has not been a good one. And they're very mistrustful of anybody. They don't trust anybody. And I got a phone call that Ed's grandson was in the color guard at some event at University of Nebraska at Omaha. And he asked me if I would go take pictures. Sure, I'll go take pictures. So I was getting ready to go down there, and then he called me back and he goes, I want to introduce you to another brother. And it was Derek. His name's Derek. And Derek is the epitome of the I'm going to scalp you and leave your body in the dirt kind of guy. And I'll clean it up. But he said, if you gave two hoots about us, you'd be up here now. And I know you don't. So I got off the phone and I thought about it and I thought about it and I thought about it. And I thought, you know what? I have to go. So I went. And there's a little outcropping up there that is the American version of an Earth Lodge. And he told me to meet him there. So I did. And I took my daughter with me. And he's like, I can't believe you did this. Here I am. You want to be a smart mouth with me? Here I am. And they decided to take me to all of the normal visitor sites. So we went to over hill, over dale, through fields, up the hill, through the dirt, to where there's a creek up there that runs, most water runs north to south. This creek runs south to north. It's kind of amazing to see because it looks weird. And I'm hanging over the edge looking, and they take me up to what they call the Earth Lodge. In the meantime, as I'm hanging over the edge, Derek acts like he's gonna drop me. And I just turned around and looked at him. We go to the Earth Lodge. He jumps off the Earth Lodge and war hoops at me. He jumps out from behind trees trying to scare me. And finally, I just looked at him and I said, is that all you got? And he's like, so he gets right up into my space, sticks his finger on my nose, and he goes, you, girl, are a warrior. And I said, well, I don't know about that, but I don't scare easy. I'm married to a Marine. Been there, done all that. So they were having a bonfire. They do what they call res squatching. They're in seek of, they call him Situnga. And it's basically Bigfoot. And they were going to go res squatching that night. And so they were all out around this big bonfire. And all the chairs were full. And Derek says, or Ed says, if any of you were gentlemen, you'd get up and let her have a chair instead of making her sit on a pile of logs. And Derek says, she won't sit on a pile of logs. So I marched my happy self over to the pile of logs and sat down. My daughter's going, oh my gosh, Mom, I can't believe you just did that. But that opened the door with Derek that I wasn't trying to be arrogant. I wasn't trying to be anything but curious about who they were as a people, including personally who he was as a person. And he started showing me videos and he started telling me stories. And there was another lady there who was very upset because then they loaded me into a truck and took me up to the Holy Fireplace, which is one of their most sacred spots. And then they took me to several other of their sacred spots. And when we got back to the fire, she was kind of not nice. And they kind of told her how to get out of there and where to go. So it was kind of interesting that quickly Derek had made up his mind who I was. Ed already had, because Ed had interacted with me quite a bit. But it was interesting that Derek made up his mind that quickly. And there's another brother, Barry, there, who is, I don't know what you call it in the LDS church, but he's a priest. Mm-hmm. I guess. In the LDS church.
Something we have, so yeah.
And he starts lecturing me. Well, I don't lecture really well. And I told him, I said, Barry, I'm not Mormon. I'm not going to be Mormon. But it doesn't mean that I can't respect your religion. And I will respect your religion and your rights to that religion if you will respect mine. And then he started lecturing me about fellowship. And by now there are several other elders that have joined us at this bonfire. And one of the ladies had brought a great big pot of soup and fry bread. And I think it's kind of like what do they call the hot dogs on a stick? But it's made with fry bread. And they're like, oh God, you got to try these. You got to try these. Oh my goodness, are they good? Corn dogs, that's it. But it's not corn dogs. It's made with fry bread. And so we're sitting around and Barry's lecturing me. He goes, well, if you don't go to church every Sunday in a church, how do you get any fellowship? And I sat down and I looked at him and I said, well, Barry, am I not having fellowship now with all of you? Boop, end of story. Conversation over. And they went back to letting some of the elder ladies and the elder gentlemen tell stories. And we sat there until well after dark. And now my daughter's going, Mom, how do we get out of here? It's dark. I can't, I don't know where the road's at. And I'm like, don't worry. I'll make Derek lead us out. And so when I left, he gave me a big hug and told me that he hoped I would come back. And that's kind of how we evolved into being accepted in that small circle of sisters and elders and the family, if you will. All of a sudden, they decided I was okay. And then it just kind of evolved from there. The first year, they're very oppressed up there and very depressed up there. And we decided here in Florence that we wanted to do Christmas for the kids. So we got these cheap little nylon backpacks, filled it up with all kinds of goodies, and had cookies and hot chocolate and that kind of stuff, and invited all the kids. And they were kind of like very tentative. The people were very tentative when they came in. And they're like, one of the gals said to me, and I'll never forget it. She had the cutest little girl. I want to steal this little girl. She said to me, and what do you want? And I said, I don't want anything. I want to see the smiles on the kids' faces. And I had taken Sister May, and there was another sister. I don't remember which one it was now, but they had gone with me, and they're petrified because these women are formidable. But we had a very successful event. The kids were happy. Well, then all of a sudden, well, maybe she's not so bad. And that evolved into, I don't know, I've probably done 24 events up there over the years. We did Married to a Marine. We got the Marine Corps involved with Toys for Tots this year. And we took 780 toys to the reservation. So every child in both schools at Walt Hill and at Macy, all the kids got toys. And then I had purposely, and I don't know for what reason I did it, but I asked for 100 extra toys than I needed. And that allowed them to do something with the kids, the drummers. They have a dance troupe called White Eagle Club, and it's the oldest dance club in their community. And that allowed them to do with the kids a dance contest for Christmas, and the kids and the drums too, obviously. And that allowed them to have gifts or prizes that those kids could win. And there was enough there that all the kids won. And that was pretty special. And then we went and did a root beer float day at the nursing home, where they were just, again, and now bear in mind, these are all the older people. And they're like, what do you want? Why are you here? What do you expect to get from this? And I said, well, first of all, I'm here to give you a root beer float. And second of all, it's going to cost you a story. Tell me a story. So they told me stories of how they had to cook on big open fires in pots and what they had to throw in them, and just everything basically from a woman's perspective of the day. And then we did, my daughter is a manager of a Sam's Club here in town, and her associate, she has a lot of mother daughters, father sons. There's a lot of multiple family members that work for her. And every year they get turkeys for Christmas. And they decided that what they wanted to do was donate the extra turkeys to the reservation. So I took 300 pounds of turkeys in my car up to the reservation. And we went around and delivered some to the senior center. We delivered some to the nursing home. And then we went to individual houses where we know there were a lot of people in the household and not much money. Very well received. And then they had, we've just done a ton of things like that. And I started, I bet a year and a half in, I started picking at the elders, the elder men, because their oral history or their history period is passed down from oldest son to oldest son to oldest son. And some of these guys are in their 90s and they carry these stories. And if somebody doesn't record them, they're going to get lost. And so, of course, now I'm taking a page out of Mark's notebook. Is the first thing he wanted to do was read whatever he could get his hands on. So I had lent him a book, which he promptly went and bought the better version of it, which is Mark. And I forgot where I was going. As I'm reading these there's a lot written on the Omaha Nation, a lot. So I'm calling these elders and I'm saying, but I read this, this, and this, and that's not what you told me. This is wrong. And finally, one of the elders said to me, honey, that's because no one ever asked us. And I'm like, well, how can you write a book about somebody if you don't ask them? Because that's beyond my scope. And they said, well, I don't know if they were afraid of us or what the deal was, but nobody ever asked us. So that sparked my brain. And I spent 30 years in advertising, marketing, publishing, that arena. And I said, well, how about if we do a book of all of your stories called The Omaha Nation from the Inside, because no one ever asked. And they told me I was crazy. And I said, well, and they said, what do you want us to do? And I said, well, what I want you to do is either write down the stories or let me come up and record them and I'll type them. No, we don't want to do that. And I just let it go. And then it was all of a sudden one day I got the first starts of stories that they had sat and typed themselves. I'm sure it took forever because none of them know how to type. But I got 14 pages of stories and a note that said, you're going to need to fix the grammar. Well, I don't want to fix the grammar. This is their way of speaking. And I said, I'm not going to fix anything. I'm going to put it in there just like you wrote it. And I'll correct spelling, but I'm not going to correct grammar because you really don't want me to do that. And so that started us down this journey of creating this book. And then all of a sudden I get called in front of tribal council going, what are you doing this book for? Well, because nobody ever asked you. And the best way to learn about a people is to ask them about it. And I said, I've read a whole lot of things about the Omaha Nation, and I've read a whole lot of wrong things about the Omaha Nation. And this will set the story straight. Well, what do you get out of this? I said, nothing. I said, my intention is to make a book, get it published, give it back to the tribe, and you guys decide what you're going to do with it. Oh, well, then the buzz went around the entire tribe wondering if I would actually do that. And the consensus was I would. So now about every month I get a chunk of stories from them. And of course it takes me 2 days because I have to read and reread them because they're just fascinating about the days when they had buffalo hunts and the days when they had interaction with Situnga and days when they had the creator come in a vision at the lodge. And these things are just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm pulling out just some points that I'm hearing you talk about as you're speaking about this. It seems to me, and you can kind of correct me or kind of adjust what I say, when you are first, or when you first were talking with them, there was a lot of, and probably even still, but a lot of like expecting you to get something from it.
Yes.
Right? Was that like a common, I mean, I guess I'm even asking myself that when we go out to help people or when we go out to learn about people, I guess that's even an internal question for us all. Are we actually trying, like, what are we trying to get from them? Because that seems to me like that was really their question to you.
Well, I'll give you a story, Rachel, that is my favorite story because it just tore me up. Mm. My husband worked for the hospital here in Omaha, and their laundry, when the towels get frayed or a little bit worn, they put them in a bag and they sell them. Mm-hmm. Well, my husband worked for the hospital for 35 years. So I was used to having these towels around. And one day I had this bag, a big, huge bag, it weighed 100 pounds in the back seat of my car. And Ed says to me, are those towels? And I said, yes. And he goes, where'd you get them? And I said, explain the story of my husband worked for the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, can you get more? Yeah, I get all of them I want, or all that they got. Why? Well, a simple thing that you and I take for granted as a towel, we want to take a shower. We go to the linen closet, we get a towel, we take a shower. We don't think anything about it. But Ed introduced me to a family of 12 that had 2 towels. Mm-hmm. And so the next time I went, I had 4 bags of towels, and they have a swimming pool up there. And everybody, including me, wanted the kids to get them first. So I'm handing out towels, and they're telling me thank you and giving me hugs. And this little boy comes up, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody asked if they could take a picture. And I said yes. And the little boy kind of looked sheepy, and he finally agreed to it. And he's holding his towel, and he takes the picture, and he turns around and he hands the towel back to me. I said, no, buddy, I don't want that towel. That's yours. For keeps? Yep, for keeps. He goes away, and he comes back crying and tries to give me the towel again. And I said, honey, I don't want the towel back. That's for you. That's a present for you. And he goes, are you sure? And I said, yes. He must have been, I don't know, 8 years old. And he goes skipping off, and he tells Mom that she said this towel's mine for keeps. And one of the other ladies came over to me and said, I'm going to tell you why he's acting like that. And he's acting like that because the quote unquote white man came up with toys, wanted to take pictures, and they took the toy away from him. And that just killed me. So I had to establish with the kids that I don't want anything from you. I'm bringing these towels for you. And
that's
so now
heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking. I was standing there and I wanted to cry, but I knew better than to cry. And so now when I take towels up there, I go to the pool because they do the pool in shifts. So you'll have the little kids first, and they get 2 hours. And then there's 2 hours of the middle-sized kids, and then 2 hours of the big kids. And I think the big kids probably have more time, but they see my car parked there and they line up. They will have a perfect single file line from my car all the way down past the pool to get a towel.
Yeah.
So that was an establishment of that trust with the kids.
Yeah.
And through that trust with the kids, I got a little bit of trust from the adults. But everything I did and everything I do, I go ask the elders permission to either do it or say it or whatever. And through that, we've established that trust that I'm not there to do any harm. And that's what they think.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is a collective memory, and how much of that is consistently happening all the time to them, like within their own lifetime? I mean, it sounds like this has happened to the boy before. So obvious. I mean, it just seems so strange to me that this is happening, but I know, and I hear that this is a major problem. We have this problem where we feel like we have to go in and solve all these problems for everybody without actually even asking if what we're doing is actually helping them. So I'm just curious, like, how much of this is an active problem versus a collective memory, or maybe it's both. And here's a major issue.
here's an example of the current misdeed. During COVID, all the counties, all the states, and by county, they were given allotment of money to take care of vaccines and their people that were sick and all of that. And the illustrious governor of Nebraska said, nah, I got better places to put your money. You're not going to get anything. And thankfully, they had a little reserve put back, and it cost them $1.6 million to take care of their people because the state wouldn't give them their allotment. So this is still going on. And it's like with what's going on now, they've lost all of their funding from the treaties, from whatever agreements there are. And they were given blankets with smallpox laden. They had schools where the belief was take the Indian out of the man, but save the man. I went to a site up there that not very many people, I'm told, have been there, but they pulled up. I got out of the car and I turned around and I said, I'm not staying here. Something bad happened here. 400 kids were murdered by the white soldiers at that school. And you could feel it in the air. You could feel it in the building. You could feel it everywhere. And I finally told them, look, I'm not staying here. Let's go. Let's just go. So I think it's been an ongoing thing that has given them the right to have the mistrust. And that's why I decided long ago that the best course of action for me to learn was to ask. Everything I did, I asked. If I wanted to go to the nursing home, I asked. If I wanted to go to the senior center, I asked. And LaSonia can tell you about doing the untold stories of the Black pioneers. They wouldn't let anyone speak from a particular person speak from the tribe because of one person on the public relations council at the church. Well, I'm authorized by the tribe to speak for them. And so I said, I'll just do it. Well, no, they wouldn't let me do it. So they smacked me upside the head on one side. And then they're like, well, we hope you'll help us get into the Omaha Nation for Indigenous Peoples Month. And my answer was, I'm sorry, you've already burnt that bridge with me. You need to go do exactly what I do, is go ask them.
Yeah.
Well, a week later, I find out that they had already been to tribal council and asked them if they would be interested in participating. And the tribal council said, well, you'll have to talk to Dee. She kind of directs what we do off the reservation. And the answer was, we already asked her. What'd she say? No. Well, then I guess you have your answer.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you've been able to get that level of trust. And I like how, well, so it seems to me like you had, so number one, you had to even sit. I think what's hard sometimes is even sitting with, why don't you trust me? What's your problem? Of course, I'm a trustworthy person, right? Like just this automatic assumption that, of course, we're trustworthy. What's your problem? And actually,
turn around and I'll stab your back, right?
I know. Like, so I feel like that is a hard thing for, I think, culturally, kind of the majority group to understand that, that lack of trust is serious. It's there, and you just need to sit with it. And it seems like you did that. Like you didn't tell them they were wrong. You didn't like go in their face and say, well, why don't you trust me? Of course I'm trustworthy. So I really admire that. And then this concept of curiosity you brought up, of you were just curious. You really just wanted to know. And then that idea of asking permission, I think, is huge. It's
respectful.
It's respectful. It's acknowledging their own self-will, their own right to who they are as a people, and it's not like, I think there really is this concept of, we are the parents, we are the authority, right? And we come in and we help you and we give you what you need, but we just demand you to automatically respect us without that same level of respect given in return. Like they're not children, right? Like we don't treat people like that. We don't treat other adults that we feel like on the same level like that. So I think that's a big one too.
Well, and I have one of the elders. This is kind of funny. He fell and broke his hip. He's 91, I think. And he fell and broke his hip. And I had just lost my uncle, who was 95. And I had just bought my uncle a lift chair. So I said to one of my brothers, bring the truck down and take this chair for Uncle. And he goes, well, how much do you want for it? I said, I don't want anything for it. I want it to go where it's going to be used. Well, Uncle takes it. He's now in love with the chair. And he called me one day and he goes, do you know where you can go buy Monopoly money? And I said, yes. And so I went and bought him Monopoly money. And he charges his grandkids $1 for a ride in the chair. So when I go out there and I want to hear a story, he'll go, what do you want? And I said, I want a story. Well, that'll cost you $20. So I go over to the Monopoly money pile and I get $20 and give it to him. And then he'll tell me a story. He thinks it's just a hoot.
I love that. Yep. And then Lasonia mentioned here, and I think I kind of touched on this too, but you asked them what they needed rather than you telling them. I just, why is that hard for people to do? Like, why is that hard not to just ask people, what do you need? Let's we're at the same table together.
Well, and the people here in Florence are incredibly generous.
Mm-hmm.
And the next generation of grandmas are dying off and people are cleaning out houses. And I have a friend who had a hoarder that she rented to that left all brand new clothes in a walk-in, and I mean packed in a walk-in closet with the tag still on them.
Mm-hmm.
And she called me and she goes, "Can you take these to the reservation?" I said, "Sure." So we loaded my car, and then I had to have somebody come down with a truck because I couldn't get it all in my car because there was probably a year's worth of food, canned food. And we took it up there, and we were trying to think of a way. There's a 5013C up there called Akihide. And I know at least 3 of you have heard me say that. 4 of you have heard me say that before. And it means take care of one another. And we decided that we were going to open a thrift shop. So again, we went and bought Monopoly money, and the ladies get a skill, a job skill. They have to take in whatever I bring. They have to sort it, kids, men's, women's, household, whatever. And then I can walk in there and I get $200 in Monopoly money when I walk in, and I go shopping and I buy whatever I want. And then they go to the cash register and they get rung up because they have to price everything. And then you pay them with Monopoly money, and they have to give you change. I have to bag it for you. They have to inventory it. At the end of the day, they have to close it out. They have to keep the books. They have to do the whole 9 yards. And then as you're walking out, your Monopoly money change goes in a basket by the door, and we're done. And it's been a huge success. There's been 3 that participated in that little program that have now gotten retail jobs.
Yeah, that's a very innovative way of doing that. So I think the other thing I heard you say, and again, this actually goes back to allowing other people. I think this is what hit me when I heard you talk about this is nobody asked us, right? That concept. And that a lot of the history that had been written down was actually wrong. A lot of the things that were written down is wrong. And so
what they didn't know, they made up.
Yeah, that's what I'm almost wondering.
They did.
Like, what?
They did. If they didn't know, they made it up.
Mm-hmm. Or something like that, or assumed, right? You make your own assumptions. And how much of that is based off of our own culture that we don't even know is a part of who we are, biases or whatever that we just throw in the fray here to create this story.
Well, and there's a story they tell. They met Lewis and Clark in 1804.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the braves was just learning how to use, I guess it was probably a musket, but he shot Meriwether Lewis. And it wasn't intentional. It was an accident. They took him back up to Florence, was called Big Village in the day. So they brought him to Big Village and they nursed him back to health, took him up to what is now the reservation, and sent a troop of braves with him. And that's how Lewis and Clark got across Nebraska. But nowhere do you ever hear in the diaries of Lewis and Clark, nowhere is it written that it was the Omaha Nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's just sad.
Yeah.
That's just sad.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just really grateful that you have created the relationship that you have so that we can have their stories with their own words. And the other thing I loved was that you didn't want to change the language or the grammar.
Nope.
I have thought about that in a couple of instances because as I kind of have been delving in this kind of racial area, I've recognized my own bias when I hear people speak or when they use certain language. And I have made assumptions, and I have to catch myself that, oh, they're not educated, or, oh, they don't really know what they're talking about, or there's something off, or they're simple or whatever. And I find myself kind of slapping myself on the hand, because I'm recognizing I've been programmed to think that there's a certain language that should be used that indicates an education level of somebody or how smart they are, or
Our cultural level.
yes. And I didn't recognize that was kind of like training that I had received, right? Like I had received these cues that certain ways of speaking mean something. And I have been totally wrong. That's where I kind of was like, oh, that is absolutely false, because I have spoken with highly educated people
That haven't got a brain in their head.
Yeah. So that is just the thing. And so even hearing you say that, I'm like I could see people possibly reading some of the things they write and thinking that, right? Like, oh, they're not educated, or they don't know what they're talking about. And yet how false that is, how that's such a false way of looking at the world, because we're just brought up to think certain things. Or
But that's how Lasagna and I became friends. Was she and Sam walked in the parade. Was it last year, Lasagna? Yep, last year. And I didn't realize that there were Black Mormons. Never crossed my mind. And when everybody had left, Sam and Lasagna were still sitting at the table, and I walked over and I sat down and I said, I didn't know there were Black Mormons. And Sam immediately, her feathers came up and she got ruffled, and she's like, well, yes, there are. And I said, tell me. And she kind of looked at me like, well, what do you want? You know? And then thankfully Lasagna stepped in and said, whoa, here. And so we started talking, and that's led to amazing things that Lasagna does and is doing, and that I can be a part of, like Untold Stories. I learned so much doing that program. And it was lots of long nights on the phone, us discussing journals and thought processes, and the lack of people giving credit for, and it's not even credit, acknowledgement, not even acknowledging what people have done. And that's where the Omaha tribe and the Black pioneers fall in. They're not given credit or even acknowledged. And that's what the Omaha said to me, is nobody's going to acknowledge us. And I said, well, I am. I know I'm nobody, but I'm going to acknowledge that. Lasagna brought the Black pioneers to light in a way nobody ever thought about before. And I think Marion and Carolyn can attest to, well, Stephanie can too, what an amazing event that was. And so we have a tendency as a culture to judge people by how they're dressed, how they speak, how they look.
Yeah.
And it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know, it reminds me, it was a podcast that I listened to of, there was a hairdresser or somebody who did cosmetics or something along those lines. And she actually was looking at how people were treated depending on how they looked. And she would take people off the street who were homeless and dress them up and put the makeup on and do the hair. And, you know, was really paying attention to how people treated them after that, right? And there was a huge difference. And it goes even back to Stephanie. We were just in this class the other night when we were talking about hair of African Americans, the concept that professionalism includes straight hair, and the amount of work sometimes that African Americans have to go through to straighten their hair just to be accepted professionally, which just seems crazy to me, thinking about it now. So yes, definitely these ideas of, so anyways, I was impressed with this idea that you're wanting their words to stay as they are. I think we all need to learn to do that. I think we all need to learn. They may talk different, use different words, different vernacular, and we need to accept their way of talking and communicating.
Well, and they hear that from me all the time, because they'll be talking, and one of the things that they do that I love is what they say. They will say to me in Umahan, that's their language, and then they'll say it to me in English. And so now they'll pause when they use an Umahan word that they know I don't know, and wait for me to see what I do. And I go, what's that? What's that word? And then they'll explain the word, or the best they can, because sometimes the word doesn't make a direct translation. But they're now in a point where they will pause and teach me what the words are. They used to send me a word a day. And for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Japanese. And I butcher the words. I just butcher them. And one of the elders goes, aho is a male's version of acknowledgement. It's kind of like this versatile word for everything. They'll go, aho. First time I ever heard Umahan speaking with Japanese accent. And I'm like, sorry.
I love
But
that.
in this process, I come from, my grandparents were the first Japanese in my family here. So I was raised with a lot of that culture. And it is amazing to me how much of my family's culture crosses over with the Umahan belief system.
Oh,
It parallels it practically.
Wow.
And they test those things in me. They'll say, okay, so here's the situation. This, and this happened. What are you going to do? And I said, well, I was raised to do whatever I could do to help, or I was raised to walk away, or, you know, whatever the situation is. And they continually test. I don't want to say test because not anymore. It's not a test, but they still query what my thought processes are and what I missed it, Sonia. Sorry. They continue to query my questions. And one of the things that LaSonia found when we were doing Black Pioneers was a journal that spoke a lot about the Omaha Nation and the interaction with Brigham Young and the interaction with the people in winter quarters. And so I sat one day and I took excerpts out of this journal that were all referencing the Omaha Nation, the good, the bad, the ugly, the fun, the tragedy. I took all of it out of this journal and put it in a document. And it is now this, you ought to see this document. It looks like somebody put it through a shredder. It's been passed around the tribe because they were curious. They are curious about what winter quarters people, Brigham Young, what they all thought of the Omaha Nation.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you know, this is what I got. Sorry.
Not a lot either. No. So LaSonia mentioned how some of the rituals, and it kind of goes along with this idea that of assumptions we make, that the rituals of whites that was showed and assumed to be wicked. So I'm assuming, like, I'm looking at this as like African Americans or other cultures, even their rituals were seen as being wicked or sinful or bad.
Yeah.
And that, you know, a lot of things are about possession and property, and that is that colonialism, I think, concept that we brought with us. That reminds me too. I was just listening to a thing on trauma, and one of the things they're finding, so the vagus nerve, which kind of calms our nervous system down, runs down by our vocal cords. And so these deep, low, and again, if you've ever seen a woman in labor, they do the deep, low moans. These deep, low moans help calm our nervous system. And I thought about how a lot of cultures have like these low drum beats or rhythms or noises. And I thought, you know, we I think in a white culture would be like, that sounds really bad. like
Listen to
know,
the music your dad did.
Exactly.
You can hear those low tones in there.
Exactly. And I thought, you know, and I know I've heard this before, you know, like, don't listen to that music, right? Like, that's bad music. And it has nothing to do with the actual music, but it has to do with the beat and the rhythm and the low tones and, you know, all these things that actually probably were part of rituals to help calm the nervous system. And they just knew that that's what helped, right? Like, that's what helps in a ritualistic way to communally calm our nervous systems. That's something I thought as I learned about that. I don't know if that's true, but it kind of made sense to me. And yet we kind of looked at it that way. Go ahead, LaSonia.
I was gonna say, you know, it's so interesting because a lot of it does have so much to do with religion because, you know, Dee made a lot of comments about, you know, the way they see the creator is, you know, Wakanda. And how we use that to harm one another. And
Yes.
you know, there's something that is happening literally in North Omaha, and Dee may know about this right now,
Mhm.
But there's three young ladies. There was four of them that got swept in the Missouri River.
Yep.
And it's amazing to see. One is the Black young lady, and the other, I'm not sure what their nationality is. It almost looks like Malaysia or something. I'm not sure. Dee, I don't know if you know about that.
They're a mix. They're
Okay.
they're a I call them hybrid because I don't like the other words.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm not sure, but it's just a really they're kind of an odd combination friendship, but they're in high school and they were all young. And the thing that's so interesting to me right now is how this community is coming together to not rescue anymore. It's definitely a recovery kind of a thing. But I've listened to some really kind of hardcore people talk about when they see this group of friends, they go, they were really family. Like to see them, because they're definitely different cultures, they're different nationalities, but the one jumped in a river to save the other. You know what I'm saying? And they've been lost, and they just find this one young lady that actually somehow she was saved. But it's the same concept when we look at one another. You go, why is it so hard for us to be able to say, yeah, we can be friends. There's commonality. We're people. It's like nobody sees each other as human beings. We are all human. We're not one, some people always used to say, you cut me, we all bleed the same. We have the same colored blood. Why is it so difficult to see that? And why? Because you speak differently. You perform a different culture to respect, which you consider creation or and everybody has their way. It's like, why can't we just see each other? Why do we have to assume, if a person walks around and they have a hood on their head, maybe they're cold. Why do you see people like this? And I just think that until we can see people as people and human beings, it is very hard for us to get past this, which it shouldn't be, but it seems to be.
Well, and I had one of the sisters at the trail center tell me the other day, she says, did you know I have horns? And I said, excuse me? They actually had a woman walk into the trail center and ask if it was true that Mormon women had horns.
Yeah, I actually had somebody ask me that when I was growing up.
I've been asked that as well.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, and it was like, Stephanie, the first time I met Stephanie, it was an instant bond. Lasagna had not said anything about it other than my friend Stephanie's coming. Had no idea who this person was, but I got another sister in Stephanie just because we didn't look at color. We didn't look at anything but a person. And Sonia's the same way. And of course, Marion and Carolyn, duh. But that was what saved me. I went to an urban high school in North Omaha during the riots. And what saved me is when they were threatening me, I'm like, hey, look again, folks, I'm not white. And it's sad that I had to say things like that.
Yeah. Marion, did you have something?
Yes. Please excuse me. I've had cataract surgery yesterday, and I'm trying to find anything that will help me see. Yeah, it's awesome. But I have a question and a comment first, I think. Most of what we've been doing the past couple of years, I have decided is for me, to change me. And I hope to be able to be of use to anybody in our project here and trying to make a difference in the world. But if not, I am a different person. I've had people tell me that. One exercise I did the past couple of weeks that I recommend and maybe you've already done this, but I have learned that what you've been saying here about different voices and different ways we say things, we generally, well, I can't speak that broadly, but I have been guilty of judging somebody by the way they speak.
We all do it.
Okay, well, I took Rachel's instruction help to try chat, whatever it is, chat. And I wrote a story. It's a great story, but I decided to have chat correct my spelling, my grammar, and it was so interesting because it changed my voice. And what happened is, for the first time, not the first time, because I've been accused and I accept it that I have a Utah accent. Totally get that. But for the first time, I could hear it as I read the suggested changes that chat did for me. Congratulations, Dee. You have honored our Native American brothers and sisters by honoring their language. And I just want to insert this. That's a great exercise, by the way. If I was able to see it, the words that I use, the way that I express myself is very Utah. And I've been asked, where are you from? Are you from the South? What accent, what accent is that? But I just pulled up a talk that I'll share with you because it addresses this very thing. It was a talk given at BYU by a linguistics professor. And he said, we've got to quit judging people by how they talk. And he specifically targeted the Utah accent. We swallow our consonants like mountain. Instead of saying mountain, we'll say mountain. And I've heard it in other cultures as well, but he said he has done studies to show that the reason we say mountain, and other words, there's lots of them, that's the easiest example, is because he can tie our ancestry back to Europe. We say mountain because our ancestors from Europe say it that way. He can listen to you speak and tell you where your ancestors came from. So I quit trying to be a trained, beautiful speaker. Like, whoever decided what a trained, beautiful speaker is in this country, like the newscasters and such. I'm going to quit that because I feel like I'm honoring my ancestors by talking the way that I do. And we should do that for every other person in this world as well.
And Marian, there's one other thing you need to do or stop doing, and that's apologizing for your voice. That's Marian.
I know.
Marian.
It's so harsh.
I know it is, but you know what? It's Marian.
Yeah.
And don't let it be anything else.
I see, and I don't want it to be Marian. But again, that my brother talks like that. My sister, Mark, doesn't. I don't know what happened to Mark. He's steady as can be. But my mother spoke like this. And why shouldn't I honor her by speaking the same way?
And stop being embarrassed about it.
That's it. Easy to say, Dee.
I know, also, not hard, not as easy to do.
It's so true. I also, since I had surgery yesterday, I see, oh my gosh.
White's white again? Blue's blue again?
Wrinkles. I didn't see my wrinkles before. Oh my heavens. I'm old.
You look at it this way. The gray hairs and the wrinkles, you earned every one.
I agree. I used to say that when I was younger. But now that I'm here, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, do I believe that? Anyway, can I ask a question? Dee, what is the difference between the tribal council and the tribal elders?
The tribal council, the Omaha Nation is a sovereign nation. So in essence, they aren't even part of the United States. They are a
Right.
sovereign country. And tribal council is supposed to be, and don't get me started on that, their leadership. And they make decisions, they make suggestions, they create programs, they create all kinds, or they're supposed to create all kinds of things. This current tribal council is kind of worthless, but they're supposed to be the governing body. The elders are the wisdom. They will go to tribal council and they will point out what the elders or the ancestors have said that is relevant to whatever the discussion is. And the elders are to be honored and listened to in whatever deliberations are made.
Who chooses the council?
The
The
people do.
members of
They hold an actual election every 2
an
years.
election.
Yep, every
Okay.
2 years.
So are the elders, they're inherited? They inherit their position?
No, well, yeah, kind of. I gave you guys the chart of the clans? How the clans are broken up?
No.
It's
You
it's
talked
like-
about it. I don't remember a chart.
Well, there's a wheel and it shows all of the clan. Lasagna's nodding her head, so she knows what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But there's a chart that looks like a wheel and it shows all the clans in the tribe. And every clan had a job. So you'd have a hunter clan, you'd have a gatherer clan, you'd have a cooking clan, you'd have holder of the sacred objects clan, or all things sacred. And it went around this wheel like that. And from each one, if you trace them back, go to a tribal chief of some form. Because
Okay.
they had like the big chief, and then they had lesser chiefs. And Yellow Smoke was the keeper of the sacred objects. So he was a chief of sacred items. And in the day, it took consensus of those chiefs to reach a decision on anything. And if anybody disagreed, they didn't do it. So the ancestors, as their history is carried oldest son to oldest son to oldest son, the ancestors, it's like uncle. He's 91 years old. He's the ancestor of that clan, or he's the elder of that clan.
Okay.
And so there's not a lot of them left, but there are elders in each of the clans.
Okay.
So it's kind of by age and who's left living.
So Stephanie, I accidentally put your hand down, but Stephanie had her hand up.
Yeah. So let me recap first. The council is like the government of the Indian nation.
Correct.
The elders is what you consider like grandma and grandpa, the oldest living of that tribe.
Of each clan in that tribe.
Yes. So, yeah, okay. So I had my hand up because I wanted to speak to what LaSonia said, how we're all people. And, you know, we really can't correct racism or anything else if we can't see the uniqueness of each person.
Oh, absolutely.
And I say that because there's a nurse I worked with off and on for 20 years, and the way she looked, she was lucky to get a job because how people perceived her. Okay.
Yep.
Now, she was white. She wore her nursing uniform, high-waisted. She had her Mary Jane shoes, and she had no front teeth.
Oh.
She looked like she lived in the trailer park, but she was the most intelligent nurse we had. Okay. And so, like, a lot of time people would look at her like, oh my God, how could they hire her? I'm like, well, if I'm dying, call Kathy, please. You know? But
that's a great example.
I mean, she was an extreme case, but her treatment by her peers and others is like, why don't you go get teeth? Which I thought too. It's like, girl, it's not like you pull. You can go get some veneers. But, and I really think that she probably did it out of rebellion, you know? Like, yeah,
Tired of being judged.
and I offer a lot to this world. So
That's a
Well, and I've been even subject to that bias. There's a area of town here called Regency, and it's the muckety muck part of town. And my daughter wanted to go to a specific store in this mall. It's not a mall, it's an outdoor mall. Oh gosh, okay, fine. I had on sweats, a t-shirt, had my hair piled on top of my head. I looked like trailer trash. And I took her out there. Well, one of the stores was having a sale. And I was the vice president of an advertising agency. And I had to wear suits and heels and nylons and, you know, all the trappings of professionalism. And I walked in there and I picked out, I had a budget. I was given a budget every year for clothing. And I had picked out $1,000 worth of clothes and had stacked them on the counter. And they wouldn't wait on me. They acted like I wasn't even in the building. And being the wicked wench I am, the next day, the next work day, on my lunch hour, I went back dressed for work. And I collected all the same clothes, stuck them all in the same place on the counter. And it was the same woman who ignored me. And she said, oh, it looks like you've picked out some fine things. And she's Miss Nicey Nice. And she goes, how would you like to pay for this today? I said, I don't want to pay for it today. I wanted you to see the sale that you missed yesterday because of the way I was treated. And I turned around and walked out. But not everyone will do that. But it made me so angry that I was judged. First of all, I'm not white. Second of all, I was dressed in sweats and a t-shirt, hair piled on top of my head. I just looked like I come in. Well, I actually had come in from working in the yard. But that's why we have to stop judging people. You don't know, unless you've walked in their shoes, you don't know who they are. Sorry, I get on a soapbox.
No, that was a great add-on to that. Carolyn.
I hope my dog won't bark and interrupt this. She is getting old and anxious, kind of like me. Anyway, I have a couple of questions and then a perspective. So 3 questions, I guess. Do you spoke of the women who learned how to do, learned some sales skills and then they were able to get jobs. Are most of the jobs off the nation, or are they able to get jobs there?
There are some jobs on the reservation, but they're more skilled jobs.
Okay.
Teachers, nurses, that kind of thing. To get an actual job, they have to go to Sioux City, which is about 90 miles from the reservation.
Oh, wow. So they're driving there every day, huh?
Well, they're not driving there every day. I actually donated a van when my uncle passed.
Oh,
and
man.
they have now figured out how to carpool it.
Yeah.
So the van takes them.
That's great.
And then they go back and they may, the van holds 9 people. So they may take somebody to a doctor's appointment and these gals to work. And, they have, it's a built-in route that they've made and it works really well.
Huh, okay. Thanks. And then, so your process of recording stories, are you then transcribing them
Yes.
on your own? Oh,
Some of them
man.
I'm getting typed and some of them I'm getting from my hidden micro recorder in my pants pocket.
And you transcribe. That's a lot of work. Wow, that's
But
great.
it's so worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you're doing that. Then, you know, I was watching this a video that the LDS Church has made about the partnership between NAACP and the LDS Church sending interns to Ghana. And some of you have probably watched that video. And I was really struck by one of the Black interns who went to Ghana and just had an amazing experience feeling her ancestors. But there were some also some white young people who went, young adults who went. And one of them said something that really struck me. And it was, what I learned on this trip is I need to give people space to heal.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering what that looks like as you've worked with the Omaha. I mean, Marion talked about how she's changed, and I totally agree that is the case with myself. But I'm wondering what that is like to allow somebody else the space to heal. I'd like to get better at that.
Mostly it's listening.
Okay.
Just listening to what they have to say. And they tell me I ask the right questions. I don't judge what they're saying. If I don't fully understand what they're trying to convey to me, I will ask them, instead of saying, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I will say, okay, I'm not getting it. Can you explain to me in a different way so I can understand? And it's letting them it's listening to them. It's giving them feedback.
Okay.
One of the elders said to me the other day that he was a bad person because his granddaughter wanted something and he said no. And I said, so why does that make you a bad person? Well, because you're not supposed to tell kids no. And I said, well, boy, I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they need to be told no. And sometimes they need to be taught the value of earning it themselves so that they respect what they get. And he told me not only was I a warrior, but I was a wise woman. And
so he was very receptive to what you had to say.
And it's a matter of letting them, with the Omaha, and I can only speak to that, it's a matter of just listening to them. And they resolve most of what their issue is by just listening.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting to listen to them because they talk themselves in a circle and then all of a sudden they get to where they want to be. And then what they're trying to convey comes out.
In my experience with the Hopi and Navajo, that is something I had to really learn, is that there's a circular way of talking.
Yep. Well,
and
they're very open. They're very open. And so even if I ask a touchy question, they'll answer it.
Yeah.
And I'll preface it with, this is none of my business, but, and then I'll ask my question. And 9 times out of 10, they'll answer me and answer me in a way that's more than I asked for.
Mm-hmm.
The whole concept of healing circles is indigenous. Many indigenous cultures across the world actually have these talking circles. This is what that's reminded me of. That
we're trying to get that started back on the nation again.
Yeah, it is. It's from Native Americans, but you also will see it just in indigenous cultures. I think it's probably something that, so you'll even say like Gaelic, right? That this is, you'll see it in these kind of cultures that we've lost. And that's interesting. I think that's what that reminded me of, this concept of just asking questions, sitting with each other, just talking, and in that, the circular stuff going on. And sometimes it seems, I think in our culture, it seems very like that doesn't have a purpose, right? Like what, there's no production here. Nothing's
But
being.
it does.
But
I got to sit in on one of the first talking circles. I don't know if you know, but alcohol and drugs are a big issue on the reservation, simply because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
They have nothing else. And it's mainly in the youth. So we decided to gather a bunch of the youth together and have a talking circle.
Mm.
And these were the rules. You can talk about whatever you want. No one's here to judge you. No one's here to tell you you're right or wrong. It has to be what you want to talk about. And it was really quiet for a long time. And then one young man got up and started going.
Mm.
And he got it all out of his system. And he sat down and he goes, okay, I know y'all hate me now, but that's it. But what I walked away with is listening to those kids among themselves, because he opened the door, everybody else joined in. When they walked away from it, they were talking about what they talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And they were deciding whether it was right or wrong or whatever. And it was actually amazing to listen to, because I kind of followed and listened.
Yeah.
So those talking circles do have value.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's do LaSonia, and then we probably need to wrap up. So if anybody else has any questions, let me know. I don't want to cut anybody off, but just kind of know we need to wrap up. So.
Yeah, I love that idea too about the talking circles, because what you find is people don't know what they don't know, but knowing that you can talk about what you want, it's how we talk, but so many come in so angry,
Mm-hmm.
And they have, we have rights to be angry or upset, but you a lot of times really need to sit back and ask you, what is this serving? How is this serving me? Because, and not in the sense of being selfish, but how is this anger serving me if I don't have conversation? Because a lot of times we assume that we know what other people are thinking. We assume that we know, oh yeah, you're feeling this. And one of the things when I studied in the Alaska herbalism, there was a book. It was called The Way of Being Human. And I found it so interesting that we don't know how to be human. And the fact was that so much that happened with the Native Americans and various, and the cultures, just like even with African Americans, is because you saw, or because people would come in never experiencing anything with the other person, seeing something and comparing it to what
Trigger.
Yes. And so you compare it to what you think is right, and you decide what the other person is doing is wrong. Or it's, and it's just the fact that, like you said, our uniqueness, as Stephanie was talking about, seeing each person as an individual. And it just always draws me back. I have to say, always to the Savior, is that he saw every person as their own person. He didn't go, oh, well, you got this, so I'm gonna treat this. He saw everybody as individual people and every situation, and he appreciated the uniqueness of all of that. And it's like we have to get into, yes, we may be angry. Was it right, the things that happened to her? Was it fair? Absolutely not. But if we don't talk about it and we can't have these conversations, how can we overcome these scenarios, all of these things? Because this untold stories taught me a lot, right? Meeting Dee, I would have never been able to do what was done. I wouldn't have learned what I was able to learn if Dee hadn't have asked the question. It really is about us asking questions. If we don't ask questions, we don't learn. We don't know. We can't correct. the things that are going, can we fix it? Absolutely not. We can't fix the past, but we can move forward. And the only way we can do that is to have honest conversations and let people express, hey, I really didn't like this. This makes me feel, and like the young man, like she said, you may hate me right now, but I've spoke my piece. I feel I've uploaded or unloaded that burden, because we're carrying burdens. And you have to ask with the past, how long are you going to carry that? How is that?
That young man at the end of it said to one of his peers, I'm not angry anymore. I got it out. Y'all know what I got going on in my head. And it's true. What Lasagna said is true.
All right, we need to wrap up. I want to get any closing words from you, Dee. But just to I just go through some points I noticed again. Just this concept of curiosity was important. That you weren't expecting anything in return. I guess for me also this idea that recognizing the distrust and almost honoring, I think, right? Giving honor to that space, allow them that space to distrust, and understanding that that's a piece of it. So not necessarily trying to get your defenses up against it. And then again, not making assumptions. I think we talked about that quite a bit. I like the idea of giving space to heal, and allowing them their own voice, like stop trying to change their voice to make it sound more palatable maybe, or more like how we think things should be said. So those are kind of some of the things. But Dee, if there's anything you would like to say to wrap up on this concept of how do we honor these cultural narratives, and also how things are moving forward with the work that you're doing, or anything else that you would like to talk about in regards to the stories that you're recording for the Omaha Nation.
Well, they're becoming more open and more trusting. The parade last year was literally, I had people at the parade last year from the nation that are 40 and 50 years old, and it was the first time they were ever off the reservation.
Mm.
And we've been working at drawing them out. Like, I tried to do it when you guys were going to be here for the parade, but I have one of the elder ladies coming to teach a class on how to make original Omaha Nation moccasins.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
And the way she expressed it is, I want someone to know this. So they want to share it, but nobody's listening to them.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give them a platform and a good experience to come here to Florence, be amongst the people here, because we have Black, white, other Native Americans, different tribes signed up for this class.
Mm.
And she doesn't care. She doesn't care who it is. She wants them to understand and know the traditional way of making them. And her words were, if I have a good experience and I take that back to my peers, the ladies who do the beading, the regalia, there's a guy there that makes original bows and arrows and that kind of thing. She says, you'll get all of them. You'll get them all to come do it. And so I think that's what they have come to trust, the fact that I'm not going to let anything bad happen to them. They're in a safe environment because they've seen me defend them. When somebody was trying to be judgmental, the people I care about. And I'm like them in the sense that I'll fight to the death for that person. And they respect that. By the same token, it's all about giving each other respect. So the things that I do here with them are, for me, fun. They're just fun. And for them, they feel like they have a safe place to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.